Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Ways and Means Committee. It's great to see my esteemed colleagues in the legislature here today. Thanks for all your work on the budget process. It feels like this budget process kind of snuck up on us, and I am excited to get started on the conversations for this upcoming year and how we can collaborate and cooperate to serve our shared communities together across the state of Massachusetts. Like last year, I have my team here with me. Sitting to my left is Gina Cash. Then to my right, we have Paul Travellini, and they're going to be switching out with some other folks who are going to be speaking with you about the great work that they do in the auditor's office. Just like all of you, I am only able to do the work that I do because I have an amazing staff, and they do great work writing the audit reports that y'all read. So when you read these audit reports, please know that these are the folks that are doing the hard work of conducting the audits, drafting the reports, speaking with agency representatives, and making sure that their work gets out there to all of you and to your constituents. First, I would like to introduce Gina Cash. She's going to talk to you about the Bureau of Special Investigations. As many of you may have seen, our office released recently a report that highlighted nearly $12 million in public benefit fraud across the state of Massachusetts. We do this work, friends, with the intention to help make government work better for those it's meant to serve, so that those who are truly in need can get access to these life-changing services that the state of Massachusetts provides to people in need. We do this work to make sure that those folks are protected and that the integrity of these programs is protected. We know that we're talking about cuts coming down from the federal level, and Massachusetts is getting hit hard from some of these cuts, and we've had a very challenging time due to that. Our office is working hard to make sure that we are finding areas for cost savings as well, in this area in particular, to make sure that there is enough in those funds to go around to the people who truly need these services. And I'm going to let Gina get into what she does in this program.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Thank you, Madam Auditor. Good afternoon, members of the House and Ways Committee. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support over the years. This is not my first time before you. Over the years, I've been before you seeking investment in our team so that we can build out the team that investigates public benefit fraud throughout the Commonwealth. You've done that. You've helped us and supported us in being able to build up our team, and I'm here before you today to seek reinvestment, but in a different way. As you know, fraud is it's rampant in the state of Mass, as it is across I would say the federal landscape. It's certainly currently having its moment, but BSI has been in this space for over 55 years. We have conducted public benefit fraud investigations throughout the Commonwealth, and in the last 25 years, we have done so within the Office of the State Auditor. So for FY27, we are actually preparing for our 25th year with the Office of the State Auditor, and in that, we are seeking to not as we've grown our staff, we're looking to see our staff grow. And that means with their professional development and really investing in their toolkits that they have. You know, we have a statute. We don't have actual subpoena power. So we run into a lot of times folks questioning who we even are. Are we a scam? Is our information request valid? Are we credentialed? There's concerns about privacy, confidentiality that we're receiving a lot from employers, kind of pushing back on our information requests. And that is so vital to the work that we do, only because we don't have subpoena power. We make these requests for information, and it is with sort of the collaboration of information sources that we're able to identify the fraud that we have. We're a very small team, but I argue we punch way up, and we continue to do that year after year. One point I'd just like to make in terms of where we stand within the larger, state budget, we are $3 million of that, roughly $3 million of that budget, but we provide dividends that show almost $12 million on a yearly basis, and I would argue that's consistent year over year. If you look, our annual reports are available online. We provide quarterly reports, and if you look there, This year is no greater than any other year, but this is vital work. We are the state's watchdog. We have been that for 55 years, and we will continue to be the state's watchdog. And we pride ourselves on working with our external stakeholders, those vital public benefit programs that are really there for those folks who need them. And it's the mission of our team to make sure they remain there for folks who really need them. I would argue this last year has seen many changes in those programs, and we're constantly checking in with them. Is there something that we should know as the federal landscape changes? And I would argue, I pride myself on the fact that we have good relationships with the programs. We are collaborative. We're ways to help them better maintain the integrity of these programs so that they're there for years and years, and not maybe subject to some other means that might, diminish their coffers. So with that, I want to thank you again for your continued support and hope that you continue to support us through this next fiscal year, and just thank you for your consideration of my and my colleagues' testimony before you today.
Thank you, Gina. And I do want to just follow up on what Gina just said. First of all, she does a great job with the Bureau of Special Investigations. She was running this unit long before I came into the Office of State Auditor. She runs a tight ship. Her unit is one of the best. Of course, I love all of our units equally, but Gina runs a tight ship, and the Bureau of Special Investigations does a great job helping to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And, she's correct. She doesn't have that subpoena authority when it comes to the individual private finances. Our office does have that administrative subpoena authority over state agencies, but when it comes to people's private monies that they're spending, we can't go in, obviously, to people's private bank accounts or anything like that. So, that's why you'll see the U.S. Attorney, for example, doing the work that the U.S. Attorney is doing, which is a bit different. We can work with the tools that we're given under state law with these agencies. I do think it's important to say that with respect to the Department of Transitional Assistance, and Senator Dooner, thank you so much for reaching out to our office to highlight some concerns that you had last year, I believe it was. We did do an audit of DTA. We did this this recent release of the $12 million that we found in fraud. And we actually found out of the DTA referrals to the Bureau of Special Investigations that I believe it was roughly 1,700 of the cases that were investigated for the fraud that we looked into actually came from the Department of Transitional Assistance itself. So they are referring these cases over to us. And about 1,400 of those cases came from our hotline, which is up on our website, or from people just contacting our office in another way to let us know that somebody in their neighborhood is potentially committing fraud, or they know a coworker that they believe is claiming benefits that they're not entitled to, but they don't want to say anything because they're coworkers, right? So they'll call the hotline. They don't need to identify themselves. They can remain anonymous and report the fraud. Roughly 1,400 of those cases came through on the hotline or people calling our office anonymously. But DTA did do its part with respect to their fraud unit that they have in referring roughly 1,700 of those cases to us. So that partnership is really what helps us to be able to do our job. With respect to some of the issues that you've been seeing a little bit more at the national level, sorry, I've been talking a lot lately, folks. Thanks for your patience. With respect to what's been happening at the national level, a lot of folks have been contacting our office. I think it's important to talk about this with respect to child daycare services. And friends, we know a lot of people rely on these services. There are a lot of people in need. There are a lot of people who are really working hard to make ends meet right now. And we want to make sure that these services are available, again, for people who truly need them. Due to the issues at the national level, we've been getting a lot of the same phone calls that I'm sure all of you have been getting about what we are doing to combat, some of the challenges in the system with respect to potential fraud in places like, child care centers. I think it's important to let folks know on this committee so that we can collaborate and work to address these issues together, that our office actually is not statutorily authorized to be able to go in and just walk into a child care facility and conduct an investigation and a review of what's going on in individual child care facilities. That's not something that's granted to our office by statute. The way that our office can look into things like child care subsidies, childcare vouchers, is we can look at those vouchers that are granted that are referred to us via the state entities or some other way. So if they're referred to us, we can look at individual instances with those individuals that are potentially receiving those benefits in a way that is not appropriate, right? Fraud potentially. What is of note to us that, thanks to Gina, this was raised to our office, especially during this time when we've been getting more phone calls about this, is according to Section 17 of Chapter 11 of the general laws, our office is actually under statute able to investigate these instances of fraud, individually speaking, under DCF. The issue with that is that these child care subsidies are now actually given out through early education and care, not the Department of Children and Families. They used to apparently be given out through the Department of Children and Families, but it switched over to early education and care. So our office actually had to enter into a memorandum of agreement with EEC that we would be able to, even though the law hadn't changed, that they were going to send us over referrals and allow us to still investigate these individual fraud instances, and that they were going to collaborate with us and send us all of the instances in which, they had identified potential fraud. That memorandum of agreement was executed, I believe, under the Baker administration. And during the Baker administration's time in office, we had multiple cases referred to our office from early education and care under that memorandum of agreement. So we were able to investigate these individual instances of fraud. Unfortunately, for the last few years, even though we were getting 20, 30 roughly cases a year, depending on the year, more or less, since 2023, we actually have not gotten any cases referred to us from EEC. Zero, not one. And that's obviously a significant drop-off. Certainly, we don't believe that there have been no cases where there's been allegations, at least. Can't confirm that there have been cases where, that fraud was definite, but we do believe that there, have most likely been allegations of fraud, right? So we need to make sure that we're addressing these issues with partnering with these different agencies. And I do believe that some of the turnover, when different offices come in, obviously, the work is switched, right? And sometimes these issues go by the wayside, even unintentionally. And I think it's important for this committee to take a look at this statute. And this is something that came to our attention over the last several weeks due to all the national issues being raised and the phone calls coming in. So we didn't include it in our original request to you, Mr. Chairman, but I'm hopeful that you can take a look at this as a potential outside section. And my request is, and we're happy to work on the language with you, but my request is to look at Chapter 11, Section 17 of the Massachusetts General Laws and at least switch DCF to EEC, so that we are legally authorized to just go in and conduct these reviews, that we don't need that memorandum of agreement to even really exist. We can just do our job and investigate these fraudulent claims. And then beyond that, what I would ask is that we work with our partners in the administration and in early education and care to make sure that if there are allegations of fraud and they are identified by these agencies, that we make sure that they somehow make their way over to our office, the Inspector General's office, the Attorney General's office, but that there is some sort of mechanism for ensuring that those allegations are being referred over to agencies like ours who have that oversight authority over this type of alleged fraud, because we know that our constituents are concerned about this. We don't want these programs to get harmed. Because of all the craziness that's going on lately, we want to make sure we're protecting the integrity of these programs, that we're able to investigate these allegations and do our part. So thank you for your consideration of that, and I will turn it over to Paul, so Paul Travellini can talk about what he does as one of our best audit directors.
Thank you, Madam Auditor, and thank you again for the opportunity to be here and speak before the committee about some of the important work that we're doing here within audit operations. As the auditor mentioned, my name is Paul Travellini. I'm one of the audit directors here with the State Auditor's Office. I oversee our audits of independent authorities and education-related agencies. Over the past year, my unit has completed and issued 13 audits. Those audits have covered a wide range of entities, from the MBTA to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as several state universities, community colleges, and regional transit authorities. I'd like to briefly highlight one audit in particular, our recent review of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. In that audit, we looked at how DESE investigated and resolved special education complaints and how it handled reports of alleged child abuse or neglect involving licensed educators. What we found raised serious concerns. In some cases, DESE failed to properly investigate reports of child abuse and neglect involving licensed educators, which may have allowed students to be placed or remain in harmful educational settings. We also found that special education complaints were not always investigated within the required timeframes, and that DESE did not consistently ensure that school districts were implementing corrective action plans. As a result, students may have experienced delays in receiving the support and the services that they were legally entitled to. Another area of concern involved the use of special education settlement agreements by school districts. These agreements often included non-disclosure clauses, and families who had struggled to obtain services for their children were sometimes asked to keep those agreements confidential. We found no statewide mechanism to monitor the use of these agreements, and little to no oversight by DESE, potentially allowing individual issues to be resolved quietly while broader systemic problems remain unaddressed. These findings are just examples of the importance of continued investment in the Office of the State Auditor. Our audits help identify risks, strengthen oversight, and ensure that state agencies are protecting vulnerable populations and using public resources responsibly. With the continued support of this committee, we can continue this work, hold agencies accountable, and deliver meaningful value to the people across the Commonwealth. One area we are seeking additional resources is to create a dedicated transportation audit unit. I believe this is extremely important. Transportation agencies, especially the MBTA, manage significant public funding, oversee complex projects, and provide services that people rely on every single day. The size and complexity of these systems require consistent, focused oversight. Right now, because we're required to audit all state agencies, we have to spread our resources carefully. That often means conducting smaller or more limited audits at the T so we can meet our broader mandate. A dedicated transportation unit would allow us to maintain a steady presence that's great. A dedicated transportation unit would allow us to maintain a steady presence that's greatly needed at the MBTA. Having a team focused specifically on transportation would help us build deeper expertise, follow up more closely on past findings, and identify risks earlier. Most importantly, it would strengthen accountability and help ensure that our transportation system is operating safely, efficiently, and in a way that truly serves the people of the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Do you want to come up? Thank you. Oh, Georgia, I didn't even see you sitting there. Sorry. Everybody, Georgia Bochum, she is our Director of Quality Assurance in the Office of State Auditor, making sure that the information that you're getting in these audits is accurate and goes through a very rigorous and robust auditing process. We have very, very strict standards in the Office of State Auditor where we have to follow what's called generally accepted government auditing standards. We follow something called the Yellow Book. If anybody needs some light reading on a Friday night with a glass of wine, can look it up sometime. It's a lot of fun. Georgette's our person in the office who is the expert, written the way they're supposed to be and done according to code.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll briefly talk, of the work that my team does. It's called the Quality Assurance Unit. It serves as an independent quality control function for performance audits conducted by the OSA throughout the Commonwealth. Essentially, all the audits before they get issued, they go through my unit. The GAO's generally accepted government auditing standards require all audit organizations conducting performance audits to maintain a robust system of quality control. These standards specifically mandate independent quality assurance review of audits which is what my unit does, proper documentation, ongoing monitoring, and continuous improvement. The primary responsibility of the QA unit includes ensuring that audit reports are accurate, well supported by evidence, consistent with professional standards. Our team of 6 does this by reviewing audit work papers, testing documentation, validating conclusions, and confirming that audit findings are supported by sufficient, appropriate evidence. Simply put, we help ensure that when an audit report is issued, it is reliable and defensible. We protect credibility and public trust. High-quality audits lead to stronger recommendations, often prompt agency reforms, help improve government performance, and result in the more effective use of public funds. Quality assurance works to assure that these reports are accurate, fair, and evidence-based. So that's all I had to say about my unit. Thank you for your time, and I will answer your questions soon after our presentations.
And now Steve Osauskas, Executive Deputy Auditor.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Auditor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I'm here to talk about, to highlight some of the the larger requests that we've included as part of our budget submission. The first is the creation of a housing audit unit within the Office of the State Auditor. As you well know, we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars or more to help expand housing, particularly affordable housing in Massachusetts, and still experience an affordable housing crisis. We believe that investment in a new way of looking at this issue, auditing both how money has been spent as well as what exists as options to help support the creation of additional housing, would be of benefit for the Commonwealth. As Mr. Travellini mentioned, the Transportation Audit Unit, you know, as well as all of us, we have the operating budget, we have unfunded pension liability, unfunded OPEB liability, and that third unfunded liability being the capital liability. Just on transportation, it exceeds $40 billion. More than half of that falls with the MBTA. They're very significant investments that you are asked to make on behalf of the Commonwealth that we believe a stitch in time saves 9. And if we can start providing external oversight to some of these investments, it can help identify these issues so we don't get to an issue where you're presented with a $40 billion liability ahead of time. We can know about it ahead of time, but also potentially identify some issues before they become deeply problematic. And the last is an AI audit unit. Artificial intelligence continues to find its way into state government even where not welcome, even where not invited. It is being put into default email systems, not the Commonwealth's, but default web browsers, default applications that people use to develop documents. And that creates very significant risk on the executive department side throughout government. Just think of attorney-client privilege, that if a document that one of our attorneys, one of your attorneys is drafting uses AI, then that document has been shared with the entire world. Is there privilege anymore? Is there not privilege anymore? Those are issues we need to get through as a state government to make sure that we're ahead of the complexity in the operation of state government that AI creates. And lastly, I apologize, I said lastly already, but truly lastly, in House 2, the governor proposed expanding the 3-year audit mandate, the mandate to audit all state agencies from 3 years to 5 years. That is something that we have requested and we support because we believe it's important to pivot to risk-based auditing. At present, as was mentioned earlier, we're auditing all agencies within 3 years, which treats every agency as the exact same risk category. And DCF is a different risk category than other agencies. Some agencies we should be in, if we look at New York State as a model, they're high-risk agencies, they're in every year. They're low-risk agencies, they're in every 3 years. They take a risk-based approach rather than just simply once every 3 years for every agency. We believe it's important to start moving in that direction as a Commonwealth, hence our support for that 5-year mandate. Included in our request, however, is if the decision is made not to implement the 5-year mandate, maintain the 3-year mandate, is a request for additional staff to allow us to do those more frequent audits. It would just take more people to do it. We could do it with more time, or we can do it with more people. Like others, I would be happy to answer any questions that you have this afternoon.
Yeah, I just think it's important to add to that too, and thank you, Steve, that our office did actually finish all the audits as required under law. I was really actually proud of our team. Thanks to the amazing team with me and everyone who couldn't be here today, our staff did actually complete the mandate to audit roughly 200 state entities within that 3-year cycle. We finished our last audit of those agencies, I believe, with our settlement audit that we released recently. And if you noticed with that, if you had a chance to look at it, the way we were able to do that is what we've been doing is we have been auditing multiple agencies in one big audit report rather than getting a bunch of small audits going and doing an audit of each agency where there is a lot more, it's a lot more time that it takes to start an audit, send an engagement letter, go through the process, do all these different things. If we're auditing a bunch of executive branch agencies, for example, about similar topics, we have found a way in the Office of State Auditor to make that as part of one big comprehensive report. This last report, I think, was 150 pages, something like that. Yeah, it was roughly 150 pages, so you're talking a book, basically, and put all those findings in one big audit rather than moving from one report to the next just to say, we had 21 separate reports to make it look like more, when really it's the same amount of work that's getting done in one larger report, right? The mandate tells us to audit all these entities at least once every 3 years. It doesn't say anything about you need to have a certain amount of reports. I've gotten questions about, well, why are there this many reports or that many reports? We do larger reports that are more comprehensive in nature that make sure that we are following what the law tells us to do. The law tells us that we're required to audit these entities and says that we're allowed to do that as part of larger, more comprehensive audits of a multi-agency audit, so to speak. So that has actually helped us to get these audits done, and my team's done a great job at making sure that we've met the mandate. Very proud of them, but that being said, we definitely could use some more time to be able to pull the thread when we're in some of these agencies and we have findings that are concerning. For example, the Convention Center Authority last time around. I know I'm not telling anybody any news here, but our Convention Center has been plagued with challenges recently that have been very public. Well, we went in, we did an audit of the Convention Center Authority, and we uncovered some troubling findings, the law being broken, contracts being given out in a no-bid fashion, non-disclosure agreements being unlawfully executed to conceal allegations of racial discrimination and retaliation, money being misappropriated essentially or mismanaged, right? Issues with their tech department where public records were either lost or destroyed. And we did want to keep going with respect to that audit, but we had to move forward and we wanted to be able to go back in. We couldn't go back in again to look at some of the stuff that was raised to us. And I know that your Senate Committee on Post-Audit and Oversight is looking at some of these issues, I believe, or said they're going to be looking at some of these issues at this quasi. I think that's great news. I think they should be looking at those issues. But our office would have liked to have continued that work as well and been able to pull the thread on some of the issues that were raised to us. And we had to limit that review and stop and move forward so that we could meet this 3-year mandate and hurry up and move on to some lower risk entities, right? We audited State Ethics Commission recently. Not too many issues over there, as you can imagine. At State Ethics Commission, it's not as high risk of an agency, right? So being able to do what Steve was saying with respect to the higher risk entities, being able to audit them more often. We did an audit of the Department of Children and Families, okay? The Department of Children and Families has some great workers over there, people that went to school so that they could serve children in their jobs that they have right now. They want to help kids. They want to help people who are struggling and families in need. But the systems in some of these agencies are broken down and outdated, and sometimes there are failures in these systems. Even though people are working hard to try to do their jobs, we found that some of these children were actually being given psychotropic medications and antipsychotic medications with little oversight, if any oversight, that some of these kids didn't have an advocate in court the way they're required to have under law, that some of these kids were not getting access to a behavioral health counselor, to a therapist while they were being handed their antipsychotic medications, essentially getting these prescriptions, these powerful drugs given to them, but not having a counselor or a therapist there to be able to help them navigate through some very traumatic circumstances, which you can imagine some of these kids have gone through being in the care of DCF, right? So we wrote a report about that, and we identified some of these areas for improvement, and DCF welcomed the findings. They said, they agreed with most of the things that our auditors found, and they were going to get to work at fixing some of these issues, taking some of our recommendations. But we would have liked, because of the high-risk nature of the Department of Children and Families, due to the fact that they're dealing with such vulnerable populations, I would have preferred to have been able to go right back in and start auditing some other issues that were raised to us around child abuse and neglect, for example, right? We hear about child sex trafficking issues right now across this nation. We want to be able to go in and look at some of these really high-risk areas, but we're limited by this mandate that, in my opinion, arbitrarily tells us to hurry up and just move on to another agency, even if that agency is a bit lower risk, even if that agency doesn't deal with vulnerable populations. And because we're doing that to follow this mandate that's quite old and hasn't really grown with the pace of government, the budget's gotten a lot bigger, but the mandate stayed the same. We have to move from these high-risk agencies where we're trying to help folks, where we're trying to make services function better on behalf of those they're meant to serve. But again, we're feeling that push, right, to hurry up and get it done and just move on arbitrarily to the next agency. So this high-risk approach, the governor supports this. She put it in her budget. We were grateful that this administration saw fit to put this in the budget. And like Steve said, either the 5-year mandate that Auditor Bump asked for while she was in office, or appropriate staffing levels to be able to conduct these audits more frequently and more in depth so that we can keep pulling the thread in cases where the thread needs to be pulled. Thanks so much. We'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Auditor, for your testimony, and thank you to your team for their work. Just a quick question on that DCF EEC conversation, because you said that's kind of a new conversation. Is there any current bill filed with that at the moment, or?
No,
okay.
no. And we had been just doing this work and doing what the statute says that we're allowed to do, and Bureau of Special Investigations has been just doing their jobs. But due to the national level issues that have raised the profile of these fraud cases and alleged fraud in other instances in different states that have come to the attention of Massachusetts residents, a lot more people have been calling and asking us to look at certain things. And we've looked at the statute, because I called over to Bureau of Special Investigations Director Gina Cash and asked her what more we can do to look into some of these issues that people were concerned with. And Gina advised me that due to the fact that it's a memorandum of agreement, that we don't have the legal authority to just go in and just get access to some of these things. We are limited by what early education and care wants to refer to us and chooses to refer to us. And if they're not referring us anything, then we don't have anything to go with that's not given to us by that agency. So we would just ask again, I think that some updates could be made beyond that potentially that we could discuss, but I think that my request is that you include this in your budget, because there isn't a bill filed on this. I don't have the opportunity anymore to file budget amendments with y'all, but I will ask somebody on this Ways and Means Committee to consider just adding this into the language and just even making that quick update changing it from DCF to EEC, because I think that was probably the plan, but as we know, things get busy. It probably was on the table, and something happened, and pandemic was happening. There was a lot going on during this time period, right? So I think that the Baker administration probably wanted to make sure this got handled during that time period where all that craziness was going on, did this memorandum of agreement planning to go back, administrations changed, and the language never got updated. So changing it from DCF to EEC, I think would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Senator Dooner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I first want to thank you for your work with the SNAP and DTA. I know I originally wrote to you as a city councilor, not knowing what to do when I had residents reaching out to me that they were receiving cards with a number to activate it, and they didn't know why they were receiving the cards. They were afraid, when they filed their taxes, what was going to happen. So thank you for prioritizing that and in getting that done. You mentioned people pushing back on info you request. Is that in any correlation to EEC as far as like with children in DCF? Is there information that you requested that they're not releasing to you guys?
Not to my knowledge. Gina? No? No, not to my knowledge. And I think that the issue is more about oversight of this issue. I don't think that there's, one particular staffer who's saying, we're not going to give you information over at these places. I think that there was a clear drop-off, and it was in 2023, that we were getting, did I have this in here? Yeah. I think I have the numbers, actually. Give me a second to get to them. Oh, thank you. So in 2020, there were 7, this was right after the memorandum of agreement got signed. There were 7 cases sent to our office. In 2021, there were 31 cases sent to our office. In 2022, there were 17 cases sent to our office. In 2023, 0 cases. 2024, 0 cases. 2025, 0 cases. 2026, so far, 0 cases. So, if there is some way that we can be helpful in making sure that it's understood that we're here to help. We would love to be able to look into any of the allegations that may exist. We want to be part of that conversation, but it hasn't just been one staff person or, a group in particular that's just been refusing to answer our questions. It's been more of sort of just that drop off with the change in the administrations where that occurred.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that, those children don't necessarily have a voice for themselves. So I want to just make sure that we're covering all bases. And when you do like the audit of SNAP or DTA and you discover your findings, can you just elaborate as far as then what happens? You make these recommendations. Is somebody enforcing the recommendations? Is somebody making sure that, the things that you're suggesting are actually taking place to hold accountability, or who's recovering those funds? I know that's been a huge question.
So with respect to, I think the question's twofold, so I'm going to answer it twofold. With respect to the investigations that are conducted with the Bureau of Special Investigations into individual cases of fraud, the Office of the Attorney General can enforce the law and help to recover those funds. The agencies themselves, however, are often the ones who can do that and recover those funds. Department of Transitional Assistance, like I said, they have a fraud unit, so if we uncover things, we send it right back to them, and they can help to ensure that those funds are recovered. We do not have enforcement authority in the Office of State Auditor. We are there to shine a light, help people identify what's going on, and then the decisions are up to those agencies, how they handle the information that we are giving them. We are able to go to court to assist in some of these cases. I think we've been named as defendants in some of the cases that were raised recently in a couple of courts in the Commonwealth with respect to fraud cases, and we were listed in those cases as having helped to identify some of the fraud that was under review by the courts and found to have been fraudulently given out. But we don't have enforcement authority. That's up to the agencies, the Attorney General's office, and the courts. And with respect to recommendations, for example, that we give to agencies such as Department of Children and Families, the MBTA, all of these other high-risk entities. We give these recommendations, and we don't have enforcement authority to require that they follow our recommendations, but we do have what's called a post-audit review process that we go through with these state agencies that gives them the opportunity to spend about 6 months from the time the report is released to the general public and to these agencies shining a light on areas for improvement, that they get to work on some of these different issues, and they get an opportunity to report back to us on what they have done to address the issues we identified. They might say that they didn't do anything and they disagree with our office and they're not going to do anything. And they are legally within their right to do so. And you can read their responses to us. They may say, we did everything that you recommended and we appreciate working with you and we implemented every single recommendation. But it is up to that agency what they choose to do. Sometimes they'll take our recommendations or they'll take other recommendations, meaning they'll kind of approach the issue that we identified, but say, hey, we appreciated the recommendations you made, but we have another approach, and we decided to address the challenge you raised to us in a different way. Here's the way we are targeting it. Kind of similar to how everyone debates different issues in the legislature. You might all be fighting for the same issue, but we might have a different pathway to get there. So sometimes agencies will say, thanks for the recommendations, we're going to do it our way, but we are going to address this issue. And certainly that's obviously acceptable, right, as long as the issue is getting addressed. You can read those post-audit reviews by contacting our office. We're happy to send you whatever you'd like to look at. I would say that the way that we help to ensure that what they're saying is actually true is we sometimes we'll do spot check audits where we'll actually go in and say, okay, and we did this with Elder Affairs one year. My predecessor did a great audit of the Office of Elder Affairs and looked at the ways that our elder population was suffering with abuse and neglect cases that weren't getting referred appropriately to the district attorney's offices and seeking to increase accountability with respect to that system to protect our elders. We actually got a post-audit review back from Elder Affairs that said that they had essentially fixed all of the issues that we identified, and this was no longer happening and it was no longer an issue. So we decided to go in and do a spot check because we heard them saying one thing, but there were allegations about another. We went in to do a spot check, only to have the Office of Elder Affairs just essentially confess to us that they weren't telling the truth in their post-audit review, and they actually hadn't done anything with respect to fixing the issues that we had actually identified in the audit, right? And just said we didn't actually fix these things. So obviously we wrote another audit report to cite them for the same issues and ask them to make the changes to the way they are dealing with these elder abuse and neglect cases and hope that those changes were made. But we can only highlight that these things are happening, and I would ask that our partners in the legislature and in the administration consider the work that we're doing to shine a light on where some of these issues appear to be ongoing and not getting resolved, to maybe take appropriate action with legislation or other ways to increase oversight and accountability.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's great to do the audits and make the recommendations, but if there's no follow through on it, we're just doing the same thing over and over every year and getting the same result, which is the definition of insanity. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I think, Representative.
All right, so I just want to make sure I have it. So statutorily, you cannot just, in the Minneapolis case, where we saw just straight out robbery, you couldn't then just decide to just go and look at all of those places and then see if we have those same problems. So that's why Gina didn't just go say, hey, here's what we saw, these billions of dollars being robbed by all of these people. That's why you didn't go do it. And you're saying that still is a problem here in Massachusetts. So the precursor or the pretense that the administration is saying is, hey, we're going into this state because they're robbing us. We need to send everybody in there. We in Massachusetts are still in jeopardy of essentially that same problem. Is there anyone who is looking into those problems that happened in Minneapolis and saying, making sure we're not, whether it be unemployment, child care, DTA, or whatever they did there, is there anyone looking to see if we solve those or we have those same issues?
So the Attorney General has the enforcement authority to take the fraud that we've identified, dig deeper, use the authority of the AG's office, which is significant, to be able to prosecute and get access to a lot more information than our office can access. Because like Gina was saying, we can't go into people's private accounts or anything like that. I know the U.S. Attorney has done some work on these issues and has a lot more authority than the Office of State Auditor, can look at federal funds that haven't gone through the state coffers and been disseminated out from the state, for example, and also has that investigatory type of authority that allows for these businesses to get investigated, for example, these convenience stores that were operating fraudulently, and there was a bust in that situation.
My district. Yeah.
Good to know. I didn't know that. Thank you, Representative.
Was Brandy's, but it's Mattapan.
Yeah.
But so you couldn't just look at it and be proactive. I should look to the AG, Inspector General, someone else maybe I'll ask him next. Because that to me is just absurd that we know what this administration has done in another state. We should be getting in front of that. So thank you for letting me know it's not Gina's fault if he shows up. All right, thanks.
Representative, yeah, I think it's important to know that the power that our office does have is to be able to investigate claims that are referred to us. We don't have like FBI agents, for example, that just go out and can stake out a convenience store. We don't have agents that could stake out a child care center, for example, right? The feds do have folks that do that type of thing. I'm not sure what the Attorney General's office has with respect to that, but I'm sure she'd be willing to have conversations about that and cares about this issue as well. I think that with respect to our office, what I want people to know is that we are able to help with this. If you have suspected fraud with individuals that you know, that are in your circles, that are in your workplaces, your neighborhoods, wherever it is, I mean, we'll have people call and, it's unfortunate, but some people will, cite that someone in their family is abusing this, these programs and taking advantage, and they don't like it, and they let us know about it. But it really is our partnership with the people of Massachusetts that allows us insight into where that fraud is, because we don't have that FBI-like investigation to go in and to, just barge into private businesses or private residences or anything like that and confiscate any materials or go into people's bank accounts to see what types of weird transactions might exist. We can only look at the state side of it and what we can find with respect to if they're making claims that seem out of whack, if they filled out their forms correctly, or if it seems like they're not claiming income that they have and we get a tip that they're working somewhere, we can figure that out pretty easily. But that is where we're limited. So that is why we do partner with the AG's office and with these agencies who do have that authority to lay down the law, so to speak, and make sure that those monies are able to be recovered and make sure that the law is being followed once we identify it. So we're there to help shine the light and then work with our partners to make sure the law is getting enforced. Thanks, Representative.
Thank you very much. Again, any further questions? Seeing none, we thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Have a great rest of your afternoon.